My name is Ella. For a good few years now, I have been a nurse, working shifts at the city clinic. Although it's not the most glamorous job, it covers the bills, and I enjoy being of service to people. So, this guy came in and saw me standing there with my clipboard in hand. Tom is his name, and he is accompanied by his father, an elderly man who appeared somewhat disoriented. With his eyes darting around the crowded waiting area as if he was lost, Tom gave off an anxious vibe. With his demeanor, I assumed he was in need of assistance. "Hey, can I help you guys?" I walked up to them and yelled out. Tom looked at me, clearly relieved. "Oh, I'm very glad. Our goal is to locate Dr. Lewis's office. This facility is a maze, and Dad has an appointment." I smiled and motioned for them to come along. "There, you are correct. I'll take you there, so hurry up." His father, George, as he introduced himself, said nothing and simply shuffled along with us as we walked. Tom, however, continued to talk. "Dad's been a bit under the weather and we've been worried." "Don't worry. Bringing him in was the proper decision on your part." How longer does he feel strange?" I inquired in an attempt to gauge the seriousness of the situation. "For a few weeks now. Simply put, he hasn't been himself." I nodded, knowing how unsettling it can be to see a parent ill. "Yes, I understand that. Although it's difficult, you're doing a fantastic job taking care of him." Tom smiled half-heartedly, obviously grateful for the help. "Many thanks, Ella. I simply want to give it my all." We had arrived at the office by then, and I gave them a hand in opening the door. "This is where you get it. Your dad will receive excellent care from Dr. Lewis." Feeling pleased about helping them, I said goodbye with a wave and made my way back to my station. I had no idea that short interaction would mark the start of something new for me. I was struck by Tom's genuine care for his dad and his pleasant demeanor. You don't come across someone who truly exudes kindness every day. My coworker Jess gave me a prod back at the nurse's station. "Looked like you just made a new friend." I chided, "Jess, focus on your work," but I couldn't help but smile as I remembered Tom's easy smile and warm eyes. As it happened, I would encounter Tom again in the future. Every now and then, he would stop by, sometimes with his father, sometimes with inquiries, or just to say hello. Our conversations grew longer, and our laughing a little louder with each visit, and I started to look forward to those unplanned times. The first assistance I provided to Tom and his father at the clinic was months ago. Who would have thought that a small gesture would lead to something that resembled those corny romance novels? But here we were, Tom and myself, figuring out reasons to get together for coffee and extending those little encounters into lengthy evenings full of laughter and conversation. We were sitting in our customary location at the corner cafe one winter evening, snuggled up in our warmest jackets, when Tom's face took on a serious look that I wasn't used to. He began fumbling with his coffee cup and said, "Ella, there's something I've been wanting to ask you." Curious and a little nervous, I arched an eyebrow. "I was wondering, what do you think about us, making this official? Like, actually dating?" I laughed, not at him, but at the overwhelming sense of relief that washed over me. "I assumed, Tom, you would never inquire. I'd really enjoy that." Tom's parents were quite proud of their little laundry company. Beside their house, it was the labor of their lives. Tom invited me to meet his parents, Nancy and George, over for dinner one Sunday. Nerves struck me like a freight train. It was quite an occasion to meet the parents, particularly when your lover had told you that his dad was old school and his mother was picky. The warm, soapy smell of newly laundered garments filled the cozy dwelling. George was sitting in the living room, reading a newspaper, while Nancy was in the kitchen, frantically moving pots and pans around. Tom said to me, "Mom, this is Ella," as we entered the kitchen. Nancy gave me a sharp look as she scanned my entire body. "Ella, nice to meet you. Tom says you work as a nurse." You're correct, Mrs. Johnson. At the municipal clinic, I shot back, trying to find a way to smile through her tough facade. A nurse, huh? It must be difficult considering all the hours. Have you ever considered a more secure job? She sounded more like she was assessing me for something than she was trying to be kind. Even though her remarks stung, I maintained my composure. I love what I do, Mrs. Johnson. It's rewarding, and I manage the hours just fine. Dinner was a mix of awkward silences and tough questions from Nancy. George mostly stayed quiet, occasionally throwing in a word or two, mostly about the laundry business. It was clear they were proud of their work and hinted more than once how they hoped Tom would take over soon. Ella, our laundry is a family business. Tom here has been a part of it since he was a boy. We'd love for him to run it full time. Maybe you could join him, make it a real family affair, George said, passing the mashed potatoes. Tom quickly jumped in, seeing my discomfort. Dad, Ella's got her career and she's really good at it. We're just taking things as they come. I nodded, grateful for his support, but the message was clear. They wanted their son tied to home, and maybe they expected the same for me. As we left that night, Tom apologized for his mom's hard edge. She's protective, you know, but she'll come around. I hoped so. I squeezed his hand, unsure of what the future held, but certain about one thing. I wasn't ready to give up my scrubs for a laundry apron, not for anyone. We decided on a small wedding, nothing fancy, just close friends and family. One crisp Saturday morning, as we planned our modest reception, Tom's phone rang. He looked at it, frowned, and stepped out to take the call. When he came back, his face was ashen. My dad, he's had a stroke. We need to go now. The wedding plans got shoved to the back burner as we rushed to the hospital. The next few days were a blur of doctors, waiting rooms, and coffee that tasted like burnt tar. Tom was a wreck, and I did my best to support him, putting on a brave face while my heart ached for him. George didn't make it. The funeral was a week later, a somber affair with too many people saying how he was in a better place. I stood by Tom, holding his hand, feeling the weight of his grief. After the funeral, Nancy was a shadow of herself, quieter and more withdrawn. That's when Tom dropped the bombshell. Ella, I need to be there for my mom. She shouldn't be alone right now. I was thinking maybe we should move in with her just for a while, until she gets back on her feet. The idea of living with Nancy in that house, one that felt more like a business than a home, made my stomach turn. But I saw the desperation in Tom's eyes, and I loved him. So I agreed. First of all, we went to the mayor's office and legitimized our relationship without a lavish ceremony in a white dress. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. The move was hectic. Between packing up our stuff and trying to comfort a grieving mother-in-law, I barely had time to process my own feelings. Nancy wasn't exactly warm. It was her house, and she made sure we knew it. Ella, make sure those boxes go in the storage room. We need to keep the hallway clear, she instructed the day we moved our last suitcase in. Of course, Nancy. We'll handle it, I replied, trying to keep the peace. Life at Nancy's was tough. She had her ways of doing things and didn't appreciate deviation. I tried to help, to fit into this new, uncomfortable routine, but everything I did seemed to bother her. Tom was caught between us, trying to mediate, but mostly just sinking deeper into his own sadness. He spent long hours at the laundry, avoiding the tension at home. I felt alone, surrounded by his family's memories and my growing resentment. Ella, why are you still working at that clinic? You should focus on helping here with the family business, Nancy said one night as we cleared the dinner table. Nancy, I like my job. It's important to me, I responded, the fatigue and frustration making my voice sharper than I intended. She sighed, a long, drawn-out sound of disappointment. I just don't see why you choose that over family. Lying in bed that night, Listening to Tom's uneven breaths, I wondered how long we could keep this up. How long before the weight of his mother's expectations crushed the life we wanted to build together. My job at the clinic was on the other side of the city, which meant my days started in the dark and ended in it too. The commute was a beast, eating up hours I didn't have, and every trip felt longer than the last. Coming home was no relief. Nancy had a sharp eye for anything done less than perfect. I barely stepped through the door before the critique started. "Ella, you've left streaks on the window again. Do it over," she'd snap, barely looking up from her knitting. "And this soup is bland. Didn't I show you how to season it?" She'd add at dinner, making a face as if she tasted something sour. I tried, really tried, to brush it off and keep the peace, but it wore me down. Even Tom, my supposed partner in all this, started echoing his mom. "Ella, Mom's right. You could be a bit more careful with the cleaning and the cooking," he'd say, not meeting my eyes. It stung hearing that from him, like I was failing some test I didn't sign up for. Our home felt less like ours, and more like I was an unwelcome guest who couldn't do anything right. One day, after a particularly rough shift at the clinic, where I'd stayed late to cover for a coworker, earning me a small bonus, I came home with an idea. I was dead on my feet, but excited to share it with Tom. "Babe, I got a little bonus at work today. We've both been under so much stress. Why don't we take a short vacation? Just a few days? We deserve a break," I suggested, hoping for a moment of connection. Tom looked up from the bills he was sorting, his face unreadable. "That sounds great, babe, but I can't just leave the laundry. Mom can't handle it alone." "It's just a few days, Tom. She can manage, or we could call in some temporary help," I pushed back, meeting this as something to feel normal again. Before Tom could reply, Nancy walked into the room, having caught the tail end of our conversation. Her face was set in a hard line. "A vacation, and leave me to deal with everything here? You think I'm just your backup plan, Ella? That's heartless, even cruel," Nancy snapped, her voice cold. "I'm not your servant ready to pick up slack so you can frolic on the beach. I'm not made of steel." Tom's gaze followed her, and then he looked at me, his expression tight. "Mom's got a point, Ella. You can be a bit insensitive. Maybe now's not the time for a vacation." That hurt more than Nancy's words. My own husband, who should have had my back, sided with her over a simple, well-deserved break. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, a cocktail of emotions that left me more exhausted. So my vacation days rolled around, and instead of lying on a beach somewhere, sipping something tropical, I was stuck at home. I spent those days mostly alone, with Tom at the laundry and Nancy giving me the cold shoulder. I'd escape to the city beach when I could, soaking up some sun and pretending things were different. Splitting my time between the clinic and the laundry wasn't my dream scenario, but after months of nonstop nagging from Nancy and Tom about not pitching in, I caved. "Fine, I'll help out at the laundry, but only part-time. I'm not giving up my job at the clinic," I told Tom, setting my terms. He seemed relieved, almost happy, but then he dropped another bomb. "That's great. Wait, babe, but I won't be able to pay you a salary. We'll just give you access to the family account. Keep things simple and tax-free." I was too tired to argue. "Sure, whatever works," I muttered, not fully processing yet another sign that I was sinking deeper into their world, my own desires drifting away. The transition was rough. Mornings at the clinic were hectic, and afternoons at the laundry were a crash course in a business I had zero interest in. Still, I learned the ropes, got to know the regular customers, and even started seeing ways we could do things better. A few months in, I gathered enough courage to bring up my ideas at dinner. "Tom, Nancy, I've been thinking about how we could bring in more customers. Maybe we could offer loyalty discounts or even host a weekly express service day." Tom barely looked up from his plate. "Ella, I appreciate you trying to help, but I've been in this business since I was a kid. I know what works." I bit my lip, frustration bubbling. It's just an idea, and there's also a room next door that just freed up. We could expand, offer more services. Nancy laughed, a harsh sound that made me flinch. Trying to take over now? Think you can run things better than us? Don't make me laugh. I retreated, feeling smaller with each word. It was clear they didn't value my input, only my compliance. But I couldn't let it go. The laundry was struggling, and it pained me to watch something tied so closely to Tom fail because of stubbornness. One afternoon, as I folded clothes in the back, I overheard Tom arguing with a supplier on the phone. "No, I can't meet that order. We're not pulling enough profit this quarter," he said, frustration evident in his tone. I waited for him to hang up, then approached cautiously. "Tom, if we're struggling with profits, why not reconsider some of my suggestions? They could really help." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Ella, I said no. This is how we've always done it. It's not about new ideas. It's about tradition, about keeping things the way my dad ran them." I stepped back, realizing this battle was lost before it even began. Day by day, I watched the laundry's profits dip, our arguments become more frequent, and the distance between us grow. It was my birthday, a day I hoped would be a small bright spot in the dreary grind of the past months. I left a note for Tom on the kitchen table early in the morning, telling him I'd be out until noon. I wanted some time for myself, to just breathe and maybe feel a bit special. I spent the morning downtown, picking out a beautiful new dress and then treating myself to a full makeover at the beauty salon. Hair, nails, the works. It felt indulgent spending money and time on myself like that, but it was my day and I was determined to enjoy it. However, the moment I stepped back into the house, bags in hand and feeling lighter than I had in weeks, the atmosphere shifted. I was met with a storm. "Where the hell have you been?" Tom barked the second I closed the door. Next to him, Nancy stood with her arms crossed, her expression thunderous. "I left a note," I stammered, confused by their anger. "I was out for my birthday, remember? Birthday?" Tom scoffed, and Nancy snorted. "A lot of good that does us. You left the laundry unattended and there was no breakfast prepared. You think today's somehow different?" Nancy accused, stepping closer, her voice sharp. Each word a knife. Stunned, I felt my heart sink. "But it's just one morning. One morning out of the entire year," I said, my voice barely a whisper now, hurt flashing through me. Nancy's lips curled in disdain. "I don't care about your birthday. You're just lazy and stupid, thinking only about yourself. You don't even do a good job as a housekeeper." I looked to Tom, searching his face for any sign of support, any hint of the man I'd married. "Tom, you don't believe that, do you? Tell me you don't agree with her." He met my gaze, his eyes cold. "She's right, Ella. Maybe you don't fit in here after all. I don't need this chaos." That was it. The last straw. My whole body trembled with the force of my decision. "I want a divorce." Tom and Nancy were shocked. Nancy clapped her hands, her voice rising in excitement. "Finally, we'll be rid of you, you stupid, arrogant freeloader, and you'll pay us back for letting you live here for 3 years. We've wasted enough on you." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the tense air. "Oh, I'll pay you. Funny, I was thinking you owe me for all the unpaid labor, for every holiday, every sick day I never took. That's what you'll be paying me." Nancy's face fell, her mouth snapping shut. I didn't wait for another word. I marched upstairs, pulled out my suitcases and started packing. Clothes, a few personal items, anything I could call mine. Within an hour, I was ready. Suitcase in hand, I walked out of that house. I didn't look back, not at the home I had tried to make mine, not at the life I thought I wanted. I moved into a small rented apartment, a place that was mine alone. No judgments, no snide remarks, just quiet and peace. For the first couple of days, I wallowed in my grief. But as I sat there in the silence of my new space, something shifted inside me. I was done crying. It was time to show them they were wrong, to prove that I could stand on my own. Fired up, I filed for divorce, laying out my case for the unpaid labor and the emotional turmoil they'd put me through. I also took a 3-month unpaid leave from the clinic. I needed this time, not just to heal, but to set up my own venture, something that would hit Tom and Nancy where it hurt, their business. I remembered the vacant room next to their laundry, the same one I had suggested they expand into. It was a stroke of irony, or maybe fate, that it was still empty. With my savings, I signed the lease. The place was a mess, but I saw its potential. The renovations were tough, and every decision, from paint colors to plumbing fixtures, felt monumental. But I poured my heart into every detail. "This has to be perfect," I told the contractor, pointing out exactly where I wanted the new washers and dryers. Top of the line, everything. Once the place was shaped up, I moved on to the supplies and equipment, choosing only the best. Safety and quality were my top priorities. I installed video surveillance and high-security locks, ensuring that my customers would never have to worry about their belongings. With the logistics in place, I focused on the customer experience. I set up a small coffee machine offering free coffee, created a cozy corner for kids, and even installed a couple of slot machines to keep clients entertained while they waited. Every detail was designed to make my laundry not just a necessity, but a pleasant part of my customers' day. Opening day was a mix of nerves and excitement. People were curious, of course. Some came in just to see the new place, others out of loyalty to Tom and Nancy. But once they experienced the difference, word started to spread. I made it a point to meet every client, to ask about their day, to ensure they were satisfied with our service. "Thanks for choosing us," I'd say with a smile. "Let us know if there's anything else we can do for you." Slowly, word started spreading. Positive reviews popped up online, praising the clean facilities, friendly service, and innovative touches. More and more people began choosing my laundry over Tom's. One busy afternoon, as I refilled the coffee machine, a regular customer, Mrs. Henderson, approached me. "Ella, dear, I must say your place is a breath of fresh air. I told all my friends about it." I smiled, handing her a cup. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. That means a lot to me. I'm glad you enjoy coming here." The popularity of my laundry grew, and with it, so did my confidence. I had created something out of nothing, turned pain into success. The satisfaction wasn't just in the profits or the praise. It was in proving that I could thrive, that I could make something better all on my own. It was a busy Tuesday afternoon when they walked in, Nancy and Tom, looking like a storm brewing on the horizon. I was behind the counter sorting through orders, but I straightened up the moment I saw them. My heart skipped, not out of fear but readiness. I had prepared for this moment, although I hoped it would never come. Nancy wasted no time. Her voice was loud enough to turn heads. "You've ruined us, Ella. Stolen our customers with your underhanded tactics." Tom stood behind her, his expression hard to read. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "I haven't stolen anything. People choose where they want to go. I just provided a better option," I responded, my hand slyly pressing the button under the counter that alerted my security team. "This is all low, even for you," Nancy continued, hurting, jabbing in the air towards me. "Making us bankrupt? You think you're clever?" I sighed, shaking my head. "I think I'm fair. I offered ideas. Remember? You both pushed me out, laughed at my suggestions. I built this from scratch. Honestly and with hard work." Tom finally spoke, his voice quiet. "Ella, this isn't what we—" "Tom, look around you. I've made this place what it is because I listened, I adapted, and I cared. Not only about profits, but about people." Nancy's face was red, her anger palpable. You think you're better than us? That you can just replace us? No, Nancy. I just chose not to settle for mediocrity, I replied, pulling up reviews on my phone and pushing it across the counter towards them. Read these. Customers didn't leave because of me. They left because of dirty rooms, rude service, and poor quality. They left because you refused to change. She glanced at the screen, then looked away, her mouth tightening. And now? She hissed, turning her wrath back to Tom. You've let her destroy everything your father built. Tom's face twisted, and just for a split second, years of stress choked out the ache of old love. Nancy turned around to face me, her voice full of desperation. Then give him a job. Bring him on in this. Debt is engulfing us. We intend to shut down. As I glanced at Tom, I saw the man I had once loved, the man who, in my time of need, had sided with his mother against me. Tom, I apologize. I'm not a charity. I'm a company owner. I'll have to contact the cops if you don't leave my land. With Tom remaining mute and Nancy grumbling under her breath, they departed. I sensed the end of a chapter, one full of difficult lessons and even harder decisions. My washing has been doing well ever since. Positive online evaluations and word-of-mouth marketing kept in new clients. I put my all into this endeavor that had begun as a challenge and developed into my passion. And in the end, I made the decision to quit the clinic completely.